Today I'd like to welcome Albert Angehrn, Professor of Information Technology and Director of the Center for Advanced Learning Technologies here at INSEAD. Professor Angehrn has designed several multimedia and internet-based management tools or simulations. What are they? How are they used? How long have they been around? And what are their advantages over traditional pedagogical methods or teaching methods such as textbooks and lectures?
We wanted basically simulations where the key element was not to decide on numbers, but to interact and deal with people in complex type of situations. Creating a situation in which managers can test their capability of operating in an organizational context, dealing with people, helping them to change or to collaborate or to have a behavior which they wouldn't have probably naturally. Now, why do we do it? Because we have evidence actually that they work better. They work better than a normal lecture. They often work better than just discussing a case, or a case can be a good complement to a simulation. So the point is that with a simulation, you enable the manager not only to understand the situation and try to suggest something to be done and discuss this, like you do with a case study, but you are more enabling him or her to make an experience, to be in the situation, to try out things. And through this, to come a little bit nearer to the limits, a little bit of their competences, of getting into situations where perhaps they are not as performing as they think they should be. And therefore, the experience of a simulation enables them to address this complex subject like change, collaboration, but also the more traditional management subject like marketing and finance in a richer way, because the participants, the managers, are more motivated to know because they've gone through this experience, and they can also share and compare each other how they went through this type of simulated experiences. That's basically why we focus so much on simulations, or as they call them today, kind of serious games, trying to use this kind of playful approach to address very complex and very relevant subjects.
By serious games, what exactly do you mean then?
Well, serious games is a term which now, over the last couple of years, have become more popular. It's meant that you want to help people to learn, but in a way which is also playful. Very often training, going to management development is not perceived as something really exciting and self-motivating. Yeah, sure, people come here at INSEAD and they experience the value of doing it. But very often the attitude towards learning and training in adults is not really top priority. Whilst we observe that people play a lot of games. Also adults play games, and games have elements which are self-motivating. You want to come to the next level. You want to play. So the idea of serious games is a little bit to inject into traditional management development methods some elements which make them resemble games and through which generate motivation, generate curiosity. The difference between traditional game and serious games is that so-called serious games should have as an objective not just to entertain you, to have you go through a pleasant experience, but also to stimulate some thinking, some questioning, some challenging of your competences, and therefore ideally trigger in you the motivation to develop better new competences to do your job.
Could you tell us a little bit more about the executive information system simulation and why there was a need to develop the Linghe simulation based on that?
EIS was a simulation that we developed because we wanted to focus first of all on the dynamics of driving change. Already 10 years ago, I mean, managing and leading change successfully in companies was very difficult, and still today, and given all what is happening these days, driving change successfully, also painful change in organizations, is a big challenge. So we said we have to focus on this type of challenge, and so we developed EIS as a way of experiencing being sent into an organization and having to introduce there a new way of working, sometimes even a new way of thinking and operating, and face all the forms of resistance that we have documented you find in companies as soon as you want to introduce something new. So in EIS we have this scenario where the headquarter of a very large group is actually sending you in one of the companies which has been recently acquired, and it's there that you have to kind of contribute in harmonizing this new company to the systems and the processes of the whole group. And this is a big challenge. You have 6 months, you come in touch with different managers and form of resistance, and your mission is the one of convincing them, introducing the processes and the systems which the headquarter has sent you there to inject, to introduce. When we modeled the EIS simulation, we took as a reference point, if you want, the Western approach to managing organization, a European or American type of model. And then, as you know, over the last years, China got a lot of our interest, and through the Singapore campus, we started operating there too. And so we thought it was a good idea to try to develop a similar simulation, but modeling, reflecting the reality of a Chinese company. So suddenly, you are not sent into a Western type of company to drive change, but you have to accomplish the same mission in a much more difficult context, namely a Chinese organization. So what we set up to do a couple of years ago, because these things start with some background research, was to work with the Nanjing University in China to conduct all the interviews, to really understand what is typical for the behavior of Chinese managers when it comes to resist change or when it comes to cultural specificities. And so we then injected all these new elements into our simulations to recreate an experience which is realistic. We have used this, and the simulation is now used in China with Chinese managers who need to recognize themselves or their organizational context in the simulation, and also with Western managers who perhaps before going there want to have an experience of what it would be, which are the traps in which they might fall. And obviously a simulation is a way of making them fall into these traps before they actually go there and do it for real.
Could you talk a little bit about the business model that you used when you set up the Linghe company?
Many Western companies, but also Chinese companies now acquire smaller Chinese organizations, which until now were operating with a very different logic. Many Chinese organizations, not the top ones, but many of them are still operating with a relatively traditional kind of Sovietic 5 years planning and budgeting approach. Now, they have not made the step towards more performance-oriented management of the organization. So the scenario in which you are sent is the scenario of a large, very successful Chinese telecom, in which they have already adopted more Western type of operating, which is now acquiring this local, very Chinese company, in which there are still more traditional ways of operating. And now you are sent there to try to inject in this company a new management approach, one which is based on measuring performance, defining KPIs, following them up using a very specific system, which again is used at the level of the whole telecom. So your mission is complex. You have to introduce new processes, a new management approach, and all the systems which come with this new management approach. And this is a type of scenario that we have found is pretty frequent and allows us to kind of demonstrate all the kind of forms of resistance and issues which might emerge when you try to engage in such an innovation project or change project.
You mentioned KPIs. I was wondering if you have KPIs for the success of this Linghe simulation. You say it's been used already.
We developed this simulation thinking about two types of targets. On one side, China. I mean, there is a big public there. There are many managers there. And learning, reflecting, understanding better the dynamics of change is something that obviously even Chinese managers should do and should do efficiently with the simulation. The second target were more Western or American managers, and we have had very good experiences, for instance, with a large Italian company, Fiat, which is the largest Italian industrial group. Iveco, Fiat Auto, Alfa Romeo, they all have operations in China and since many decades. And for them, it's key to be able to train their local managers to learn how to best operate in a Chinese environment. So there we have been able to expose the simulation to a large number of managers, then have them have the experience of going there effectively and then come back. And effectively what we got back in our studies about, I mean, we look at responses from the managers immediately after the simulation, kind of entertainment value or impression value, how much do you think you have learned? And these are consistently very high. And then we try effectively to measure the impact also in the long term, after 6 months or so, asking, was the simulation really helpful in indicating a number of traps in which to fall, or in helping you kind of designing your intervention there in a more effective way. And all the feedback we are getting is very positive.
Thank you, Professor Angehrn, for joining us on INSEAD Knowledge.
Thank you very much.